It's going to be very difficult for Shaun Micallefs to be able to send this up.
Wiki wiki wah, wiki 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 wah wah wah, wiki 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 wah wah wah. Wiki wah. Well, thank you and welcome. Well, school's back and so is Parliament, and like school, some kids are going to talk about other kids behind their backs. Mean girls like Gladys Berejiklian and Barnaby Joyce have been texting that the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is a horrible, horrible person, a hypocrite and a liar. Someone, and we don't know who, even texted that he was a complete psycho. Now, obviously, the simplest solution would be to confiscate their mobile phones until they can behave themselves and be civil to each other. But what about the accusations themselves? That, I think, warrants a soupçon of plain speaking. Now, the PM himself has made it clear that he's not bothered by any of this.
What people say in text messages on Twitter, frankly, doesn't matter anything.
It's good advice for all of us. Doesn't matter anything. It's not worth talking about, at least not coherently. He's got more important things to do, like getting on with the job of making sure Australians have lustrous hair full of life and bounce. Of course, where the PM can't be bothered to tread, we are more than happy to step in and walk all over the carpet. Because I don't think the PM is any of the things that people are saying. I mean, calling him a horrible, horrible person might mean that as far as horrible people go, he's horrible at it. Perhaps Gladys actually meant it as a compliment. But what does Gladys herself have to say about it? Yes, SBS News.
She says she has no recollection of the text messages.
Fortunately, that doesn't, as the PM would say, matter anything, because thankfully Peter Van Onselen has a record of it on his phone to jog her memory. Now, Barnaby Joyce
is that the Chattanooga choo-choo?
Has accused the PM of being a hypocrite and a liar. Well, first of all, a hypocrite is someone who says they believe in one thing while doing another. And I think, if nothing else, the PM has demonstrated during his time in office that he believes in God, and that as far as the impact of the pandemic and climate change is concerned, he's left it pretty much in God's hands. As for being a liar, well, I ask you, leaving aside the AUKUS submarine deal and him saying there were no refugees in the Park Hotel and denying he ever used the expression Shanghai Sam and telling Parliament he told Anthony Albanese he was going to Hawaii and blaming the EU for blocking supply of the vaccines and claiming he never attacked electric vehicles and denying the Australian government ever supported Clive Palmer's High Court action against Western Australia's border closures. Would a liar, when asked, as he was last year, about whether he'd had a conversation with the Infrastructure Minister prior to that minister announcing $389 million worth of discretionary grants to 20 of the most marginal seats in the country, say this?
It's not uncommon for Prime Ministers and Ministers to discuss petty issues.
See, that's not lying, that's prevaricating. And as for the claim that the PM is a complete psycho, well, it does rather depend on who's saying it. Is it a case of the pot calling the kettle black? Suspicion initially fell on New South Wales Treasurer Matt Keane.
I've checked my records. I've got no records of any text message of any such nature.
So he's saying, I don't think I've called him a complete psycho, but let me check just in case. But that doesn't matter anything either. Why not ask someone with experience in texting abuse? Mick Nobo, the guy from the pub who gives Barnaby Joyce his ideas, Barnaby thinks it might be a woman.
Some journalist's going to say, you know who told me that, blah, blah, blah. And she's out.
No, Shaun. Barnaby is on record as saying that when he said she's out, he didn't mean she or he. He was being colloquial and meant it in a non-binary sense.
Well, that narrows it down even more, doesn't it? Who's non-binary in Cabinet?
Shaun, Barnaby was using she like you refer to your car or your tractor when you've run off the road and she's stuck in a bog. I can't move her, you yell into the phone. And I get down in there and I pull him up with my rope.
Is it Alan Tudge?
Or alternatively, he's using she as a collective pronoun for people who refer to the PM as a complete psycho. Or he's using it in the French/Italian way where they gender objects, like how chair is feminine but an apple tree is a bloke.
Barnaby has apologised to the PM for his own text.
Calling ScoMo a hypocrite and a liar.
Yes, and he offered his resignation.
For calling ScoMo a hypocrite and a liar.
But the PM only accepted Barnaby's apology, saying that he knows Barnaby no longer feels this way. That's very big of the PM to forgive and forget like that.
Well, it's easy when you're a hypocrite and a liar. Yeah. What's important here, though, is that Barnaby says his
view from the backbench about the Prime Minister was based on assumption and commentary, not from a one-on-one working relationship.
What about before Barnaby went to the backbench? Did you not notice how honest and principled the PM was in the 6 years they'd spent together in Cabinet?
Well, it's all relative. Back then with Malcolm and the bonk ban and all that shit, the bar on morality and truth and integrity was too high. And ScoMo looked like a liar and a hypocrite by comparison. Now, with ScoMo in charge, our expectations are lowered and that sort of behaviour doesn't seem so bad.
Really?
Well, how do you think Barnaby got reappointed as Deputy PM? Plus, he wasn't in a great space back in March. He didn't know his ass from his elbow, let alone who Scott was.
And was it that lack of judgment and distorted view of the Prime Minister that earned him the leadership of the Nationals 3 months later?
Well, he certainly knew about asses and elbows by then, because he gave Michael McCormack both.
Well, thank you very much, Mick, for coming in. And please accept, on behalf of Mantis Hell, this litre of bread valued at, I'm not sure, the wife does all the shopping. Of the names the PM has been called, though, it is complete psycho that is the most problematic, mainly because of the word complete. Did whoever say it mean complete in the same way that you or I or the COVID-19 Senate Committee mean when they talk about the complete crisis in aged care? Because Aged Care Services Minister Richard Colbeck thought the word went too far.
No, I don't accept that it's in complete crisis.
For the PM, though, it was not the word complete, but the word crisis that was the problem.
And I want to thank everybody for the incredible work they're doing to keep those in our care in the best possible care we can provide in a crisis, in a situation of this nature.
See? He couldn't even complete the word crisis. And we'll have more on aged care later, including one of the most disgraceful examples of age discrimination I've ever heard.
Over the past day, 91,000 people have been told their samples won't be analysed because they're too old.
I know we have to prioritise our resources, but has it really come to that? And also, no extension of public health measures, but New South Wales to extend pandemic instead.
We are in a 100-year pandemic.
Speaking of the pandemic, I'm the last person to lay blame at the foot of the PM, after the PM himself, obviously. But do the shortage of rats, the slow vaccine rollout, the failure to build quarantine facilities and no public health campaign about how N95 masks are better for Omicron point to a lack of foresight on the part of the PM? I mean, it's like something out of Yes Minister, isn't it, Sir Humphrey?
Well, yes and no, Minister.
Yes, but could all of this have been handled better?
Minister, can I first congratulate and thank our health and aged care workers to distract from the criticism inherent in your question?
Yeah, well, of course, I didn't mean to suggest...
Minister, with the benefit of hindsight, obviously we all wish we had some foresight. But nowhere in the world could any country have possibly foreseen the need for it. I'm afraid Omicron's been a real game changer.
Yes, but looking back, though, do you
think... This isn't the time for looking back, Minister. The government is focused on what is in front of us, not what's catching up with us in the rear-view mirror. Let's look forward and push through.
Well, how far into the future are we pushing through to? Because going by your climate targets, it's going to be less than 10 years.
And can I just thank our health and aged care workers for all their hard work?
Yes, of course, but perhaps if the government weren't strong-arming the ones who tested COVID positive back to work after only 7 days, they could have some time off.
Minister, what happened 7 days ago is in the past. When I say we should be focused on what is in front of us, I mean literally what's right in front of us at the moment.
The election?
Yes, Minister. If you have a problem, you throw a dead cat on the table to distract everybody. Or at the stage we're at, throw a dead cat onto a pile of dead cats that we're using as a table.
Well, Sir Humphrey, thank you very much for coming along. Please accept, with our compliments, a free hairstyling session including full head foils, balayage and complimentary gel nails from Hair by Scott. And don't forget to ask Scott about his unique budget blowout blow wave. That's alarming. Now, people are making a lot of smart-ass jokes about the PM's hairdressing skills. My God, we just made one ourselves. But to those of you who don't think this sort of thing is especially prime ministerial, might I remind you that Sir Robert Menzies did exactly the same thing when Her Majesty visited here in 1954. And that is not a faked photograph. Now, people, including us, have also been making jokes about the PM not knowing the price of bread or milk or petrol. But frankly, the PM has got more important things to do than his own grocery shopping. And to his credit, as he told the press...
Now, I'm not going to pretend to you that I go out each day and I buy a loaf of bread and I buy a litre of milk.
And that begs the question, is Anthony Albanese going to pretend that he does? Labour apparatchik Vagary Belchamber.
Oh, he sure is, Shaun. In fact, if I could just read to you from his press release, he says, Wonder White bread and vitamins toast is $3.40 a loaf. Dairy Farmers Heart Active fat-free milk is $3.30 a carton. Super duper flavoured frozen ice treats, 24 packs are down $3.10. Sanitarium Up and Go liquid breakfast, 6-pack, just $4.50 each. Darryl Lee bullets, twist balls and licorice, $3.50, save 90 cents. And Woof and Good dog food, just $2. So great savings all this week at Labor, Shaun.
I suppose the big question, though, for Labor, Vagary, is who is Anthony Albanese and how can we know if Labor would have managed the pandemic better than the coalition with him at the helm? What plans do Labor have to handle the next variant outbreak? And how is Labor going to pay down the national debt while fully funding the NDIS and paying for all their election promises?
Yeah, I think the important thing for Australians to remember here, Shaun, is that Anthony Albanese is not Scott Morrison.
And that's it?
Yes. That's the only thing people need to know about him.
Yeah, but he's going to have to do more than just not be Scott Morrison to win government, isn't he?
Oh, for sure. And he is. He's also not being Barnaby Joyce or Peter Dutton or Alex Hawke or Richard Colbeck. I mean, name anyone in the government who's not popular, and Anthony isn't being them.
You think that's enough?
No. That's why he's also not being Bill Shorten.
OK, well, though, that I can see getting him across the line. Well, thank you very much, Vagary, and for coming in tonight. Just in time for the kids going back to school, please accept on behalf of Mad as Hell this gender role and homosexuality denouncement contract and a commemorative Ball City Point pen to sign it with. Speaking of which, in the last 10 days of the PM's first term in office, he has much to do. Well, two things. One, amending the Sex Discrimination Act to exclude the exemption allowing religious schools to discriminate against gay people. And two, pass the Religious Discrimination Bill to let them do it again. And all this was a big distraction back in 2019. It looks like being so again. So let's take a look at this stalking horse and these straw men and women and those who identify as non-binary who ride it in Two Sides to Everything. Well, joining me tonight are defrocked priest, former Father Beamish, and advocate for the rights of the LGBTQI plus atheists to teach religion to novitiates in convent and seminary schools, Loretta Spangle. Father Beamish, if I could start with you, leaving aside the irony of discussing non-binary issues in a segment called Two Sides to Everything, would it be fair to say that the Religious Discrimination Bill is nothing more than a consolation prize to those who lost the same-sex marriage debate in 2018 but still wanted to be mean to gay people?
Shaun, this is not about being mean to gay people. It's about being mean to the whole LGBTQI plus community. But this whole vendetta of ours could have easily been avoided by not dealing with same-sex marriage in the first place. As far back as 2015, sex was held by the courts to be not just male or female, meaning that each party getting married could simply have ticked both the male and female boxes on the marriage certificate, instead of making such a big song and dance about it.
Loretta Spangle, did your community make a big song and dance about it?
I don't think so, darling.
Would you have been happy ticking male and female on a marriage certificate?
Shaun, if I don't identify as either male or female, I'm not necessarily saying I'm male and female, am I? Just because you don't barrack for the Manly Sea Eagles or the Roosters doesn't mean you barrack for both teams.
I know, I loathe football.
If you and old Father Beamish over there are down at the pub after the match buying rounds and it's his shout and he says, darling, what would you prefer, beer or lemonade? And you say, I don't feel like one or the other. You're not ruling out the possibility of a shandy, are you, darling?
Well, maybe I'm not thirsty.
Our Heavenly Father doesn't recognise people who drink shandies.
What about legally?
Legally, I am prevented from coming within 100 metres.
No. In terms of same-sex marriage and the Religious Discrimination Act.
Oh, yes. If you, because of your faith in God, believe that same-sex marriage is a sin punishable by damnation, you can not only say that to someone who is happily same-sex married, but you can, if you run one of our schools, sack them.
All right, now City Point College in Brisbane has announced that its enrolment contract requiring students to identify as their birth gender and that homosexuality is sinful be withdrawn at this time.
At this time, yes.
The contract compared homosexuality to bestiality and paedophilia. What time would have been appropriate for such a contract, do you think? Early 13th century?
According to God, sexual intercourse, if it must take place at all, needs to occur between a man's penis and a woman's vagina. His almighty plan did not include, say, blowing a horse.
And in what way is homosexuality like paedophilia? Because if you mean like the way the church has treated it, then surely that would involve you letting it happen and not doing anything about it.
Well, Shaun, I think what's important here is that under this new bill, church schools look like losing the right to expel gay students. So now we'll have to wait until LGBTQI+ children grow up, turn 18, go to uni, study to be a teacher and then get a job at one of our schools before we can get rid of them.
Well, thank you very much indeed, former Father Beamish and Loretta Spangle.
Thank you, darling.
Loretta, would you like to throw to the break?
Honestly, Jesus himself's rolling his eyes at that weirdo over there. See you soon, darlings!
What kind of Australia do I want to live in? One that digs up coal but doesn't burn or export it. An Australia that grows my wages without increasing my employees' salaries. That both welcomes refugees and discourages them from coming here.
Which party will I vote for? The one that puts the workers and the aspirational middle class they work for first. One that taxes the rich but leaves my wealth alone. A party that gets into bed with the unions and the Greens but stays on top of the covers.
Who do we want leading our country? Anyone who isn't a fatalistic nutjob who reckons we've got whatever's coming to us regardless, so we may as well not do anything.
Someone from humble beginnings who used to be a DJ and isn't afraid to put it in a PR campaign.
A non-threatening everyman with a bit of a speech impediment who can't tell a joke to save his life, but who isn't Bill Shorten.
Written and authorised by Anthony Albanese for the Australian Labor Party, Parliament House, Canberra.
This Sunday night, William and Kate visit the serfs farming one of their land holdings and get more than they bargained for while digging for truffles to shave onto their venison bourguignon. Who did it? Why? And is it a relative? That's William and Kate Investigate, Sunday at 8:30. Followed by this week's campaign highlights in On the Hustings with Micallefs.
Welcome back. Well, time now for just a bit of fun, but not too much, obviously, given we're looking at the Daily Telegraph. And tonight we're looking at a single edition, aren't we, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
All right, now, front page first, we have Return Serb, Jock Evix, and Uzman of the moment. Yeah. But what happened here? Sydney's gang slaying. What's happened there? Where's the pun?
Unfortunately, the algorithm we used to generate our puns was on the fritz that day, so we had to do them by hand and we missed that one.
Oh.
We did, however, try and make up for it over on page 25 in this story about a mafia godfather being arrested. Don and busted, as in the expression Dumb and Dumber.
From the same edition, this one I thought was actually very good. This piece, page 13, Time for everyone to obey the letter of the law, where you've misspelled Matt Canavan's name as Matt Caravan.
Oh, yeah, that's just a typo.
Letter of the law, letter of the name, very funny.
No, it was a complete accident.
I'd say it's your best.
There's actually a much better one on page 2. Still want a four-wheel drive? Ute bet. As in U-Butte or U-Bet, depending on what's funnier.
Neither. And finally, from page 23's confidential section, if only it'd remain that way, a Davina's busting to be herself.
Yeah, that's because of her boobs. See? Those ones.
Well, there's just one there.
Well, no, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
I know, but...
Use your imagination.
Well, interest rates have never been lower, but not for long, so now just might be the best time for you to realise the great Australian dream. No, not the one where you turn up at school in the nude. I'm talking about owning your own home. Resident moneyman Wendell Vestibule, there couldn't be a better time to get a home loan, could there?
Absolutely, Shaun, though I wouldn't advise using it to buy a house.
So it's not a good time?
Oh, you'd be mad not to, Shaun. The interest rates are so low.
I don't understand.
Well, let me explain using this visual aid. You interest rates have never been lower, right? Which makes it cheaper to have a home loan and easier for people to buy a house.
Well, that's great.
Not really. Because it's easier to buy a house, more people want to buy them, which makes houses more expensive, and that ends up making it harder to buy a house.
Well, I see the problem.
Although, if you're buying a house right now, at this very moment, it's actually good because you're ahead of the pack.
Excellent.
But if you're thinking about buying a house tomorrow or the next day or in the foreseeable future, then you're fucked.
All right, so you need to want to buy a house when no one's selling any because people can't afford them.
It's a market-driven solution to an overly government-regulated economic problem, Shaun.
Well, thank you very much, Wendell Vestibule. You get to take that home with you.
Oh, great.
And coming up, Labor's dream of a high-speed rail system between Newcastle and Sydney. Is it really worth $500 million just to get out of Newcastle that quickly? Plus, I was a bit scared for a moment, claims Crocodile. And extraordinary news coming out of Canberra that I don't think anybody could have foreseen. Richard Colbeck is still Minister for Aged Care Services. And reaction to this has been unanimous. Now, our health system, like many of its patients, is screaming out for help, and some have called for Defence to play a greater role. But
the Prime Minister says the military's not equipped to prop up the hospital system.
Mind you, until we get those submarines and tanks, the military's not even equipped to prop up the defence system. Nonetheless, the military are being sent in to help with aged care. Senior hair removalist in the Defence Department, Brian Pegmatite, Peter Dutton said Cabinet had considered helping out hospitals by deploying the army to turn people away from them. If in the process you had to shoot them, wouldn't they have ended up in the hospitals anyway?
Shaun, these were horror scenarios we were spitballing. Peter was, as he explained, staring into the abyss.
Yes, and did Peter stare back at himself?
The military is quite prepared to step in and run things where needed, be it in the healthcare system, be it in emergency services, or be it in aged care.
Would they consider stepping in and running the government at some point?
Peter has been wargaming the idea of a coup d'etat since Malcolm got the arse.
Well, thank you very much, Brian Pegmatite. Oh, actually, just one more thing, Brian. On those text messages...
Peter had nothing to do with it. In fact, he made light of the whole thing when he was talking to Laura Tingle on the 7:30 show.
I mean, I'd love to know what you say about me to your colleagues in your private text messages. To be honest, I don't really care.
Right, so at the start of the sentence, he'd love to know, but by halfway through, he doesn't care.
It's that extraordinary ability to change his mind in an instant that served us so well when it came to junking the French submarine contract. No wonder they didn't see it coming.
Another wargaming scenario. Should Mr Morrison lose the election, would Mr Dutton throw his hat into the ring for the leadership? Or would you perhaps throw it in for him?
Oh, I'd be honoured to throw in his hat or any other item of clothing he saw fit to remove.
Oh, dear. And still to come while...
Excuse me, Shaun. Hello, excuse me, over here. Hello, mate, check me out, you skip.
Yes, yes, the lady in the audience there. Hello.
Yeah, Shaun. First-time viewer, long-time attack of the ABC on social media.
Well, welcome to the show. You know you can watch it on TV, don't you? You don't have to come into the studio.
Wouldn't bother switching on this rubbish.
Oh, you're not enjoying it?
All you do is attack the government.
Well, no, actually, that's wrong. We had a sketch earlier pasting the Labor Party for backflipping on the Kurri Kurri gas plant. Unfortunately, it was cut for time.
Oh, yeah, well, I must have missed that, didn't I? I was on the phone tweeting about how we should defund the ABC now that the government's reversed its cuts and promised to give you $3.3 billion. And what do you do in return? You bite the mouth that feeds you like the baby bird yous all are with your smart aleck jokes and shit.
Well, you can't expect us to go easy on the government just because they've bribed us.
Oh, if someone gives me a tip, I don't turn around and gobble neck kebab, do I? It's human politeness.
Yeah, but if we all supported the government just because they're lining our pockets, where would we be?
In a safe or marginal seat, mate. It's can-do capitalism. They scratch your back, you get infected with blood poisoning.
So to recap, step 1 was high-quality primer on the nose, chin and forehead for a radiant glow. Step 2 is foundation applied with a slightly damp sponge for even coverage. 3 is a concealer used as required to cover blemishes. 4, a light dusting of translucent powder. Step 5 is subtle eyebrow shaping with pencil. And step 6 is the application of volumizing mascara on the eyelashes.
See the full transformation on The Albanese Makeover, Sunday night on ABC.
At the same time, over on ABC Plus, it's political intrigue and scandal, starring a teenage Laura Tingle and a pre-adolescent Casey Briggs, and Gerard Henderson in his late 20s in The Young Journalists.
Welcome back. Well, our super funds took a hit this week thanks to inflation and fears of an imminent interest rate hike, meaning that our nest eggs are way below what's needed for a comfortable retirement. Hectorina Gradient.
There he is, Big Fritzy. How are you, mate?
Davy Plum offers financial advice to those managing their own superannuation funds. As his clients approach retirement age, though, they worry about whether they've set aside enough money to see them out.
Real wage growth is shit, bank rates are fucked, and 9% super or whatever it is just isn't enough these days for them to live comfortably and pay our service fees. Right, so if you look at that...
Wanda and Fritz are 5 years from retirement. According to Davy's actuarial tables, if they continue contributing to their super fund at their current rate, the capital and return will not be sufficient to last their expected lifetimes.
Most super fund managers will advise you to start paying in a greater percentage of your income so you can top up your capital and your money will last longer. But that's a tough ask when you're as old and next to useless as these two turds.
Yeah, we're right here, Davey.
Yeah, I know. You're still on the clock. All right, Wanda and Fritz have two options. They can manage their expectations and make do with what they have over a longer period of time, or they can enjoy what they have and live comfortably for a shorter period.
What do you mean?
I arranged to have them killed.
For a small but ongoing service fee, Davy will secure the services of a hitman and calculate the optimal age Wanda and Fritz should die based on their current spending. According to Davy's tables, Fritz should die on the 29th of February 2028, and depending on how much she enjoys the remainder of the estate and Fritz's life insurance payout, Wanda is scheduled to go to her reward between December 2030 and the end of the financial year in 2031. Mr. X, not his real name or even initial, has worked as a contractor for Davy Plum Financial Services for the past 5 years. He disagrees with those who say he's a murderer.
I think the fact that I'm being paid to kill these people makes a big difference. It's an entirely professional arrangement. I mean, would you call a sex worker a whore or Ray Hadley an arsehole? No, because that would be hurtful and wrong. It's just a job like any other.
Target approaching.
Excuse me.
Martin Heidegger says that knowledge about death leads to an understanding of existence, and that knowledge of existence will result in knowing the universe. So arranging to assassinate our clients but not telling them the actual date is a very valuable service, for which we charge, obviously.
Even though Davy is just a sketch comedy character ironically quoting a Nazi, what he says is true. Human beings avoid the anxiety of death by becoming addicted to work.
Being employed and accorded worth by others in the form of income is a type of protective housing we use to avoid our mortality. So too, distracting ourselves by spending money on a bunch of shit we don't need is an effort to escape thinking about death. Hectorina Gradient for Mad as Hell.
Well, not coming up because Would I Lie to You was on in a minute. Masks linked to inflammation and burning sensation. Way discovered to make horse racing even more cruel. And Flossie Dickey turns 110 on her first day back performing thoracic surgery. And how does she feel?
I am tired.
Finally, as we discussed last week, some recent good news for the aged care sector was the revelation that Aged Care Services Minister Richard Colbeck spent 3 days away from it at the Hobart Ashes test. Now, the obvious question is, where else could we send him to keep him out of harm's way? Should it be a study tour of bog snorkelling, the World Cheese Rolling Championships, or the 2022 Extreme Ironing Games? Send your entries to where can we hide Richard Colbeck so he has nothing to do with aged care, care of the ABC, etc., etc. And you could win the appreciation of everyone in the coalition. Goodbye. Oh, hang on, we have one final question from the audience. Yes?
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering if you knew when Scott was coming back to finish my hair. He just seemed to lose interest and wandered off.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. If there's any consolation, some people have been waiting for him to introduce a federal ICAC for 3 years.
Yeah, but this is just a cut and blow dry. I guess I'll just wait a bit longer. He did promise.
Yeah.